Okay, welcome everybody. Let's get started with our first analysis of what it is that's going on right now. The world is a very confusing place as we see it right now. So let's see what messages we are getting through the message on this journey for us in our human form. So okay, let's shuffle this card deck, see what comes out, and we can then take it forward from there. I do believe that there are messages, they just are unknown to us because we don't know how to read those energies. And sometimes these cards help us align and see those energies that might be hidden from what we would naturally look for in life. Psychology tends to have quite a few unexplainable phenomena. We're going to try in this channel to work out how to get a little bit more familiar with the unknown by accessing what it is that we know. So let's see, this is the first card we're pulling out. I am flexible when I can and want to be. That's what the card says. I am flexible when I can and want to be. So flexibility is not something that comes to us naturally because of the fact that we end up having a lot of programming that gets instilled in us from the very, very young age when we're an infant in terms of how we start viewing the world. And flexibility is something that is a trait that you need to develop and work on. So I think that's what we're hearing right now in terms of where we need to focus our attention and understand how to be better in life in terms of being flexible. So let's see what message we get from the universe. This is an oracle, messages from the universe, and it might help us understand exactly what it is that we as a collective in this human form need to be flexible around at this moment. So I'm just going to shuffle these cards as I talk you through a few traits around flexibility. Flexibility is also something that in psychological terms would be considered growth mindset. So somebody who has a growth mindset believes that they have the ability to overcome anything that might be in their way, that might be stopping them from achieving to the highest potential, but they don't let it be something that restricts them due to failure. So failure is not something that most of us are unfamiliar with. We have all faced a form of failure or another in life. And it's important to understand how maintaining a growth mindset and remaining flexible is something that is crucial in most scenarios. Of course, you don't want to be doing that. And I think that's our card right there. Let's have a look at it and see what the universe wants to tell us in terms of flexibility. So here's what the card reads. It says, release old doubts and fears. You're currently undergoing changes that are necessary for your highest good. They are changes that have been long awaited. Leave the past where it belongs, in the past. Trust that everything will fall into place for you in divine timing. So we're being invited to remain flexible while we wait for the divine timing to align. And what does that exactly mean? What is divine timing, right? How do we process that sort of terminology in a very pragmatic, for lack of a better word, way that allows us to understand how we may or may not exist in this realm. So let's take a look at how we can do that. And for that, I'm going to be using some tarot cards to mirror what may be going on inside the collective. Of course, as you know, this would not apply to every single individual who is landing on this YouTube channel and on this first video that I'm creating. I have been meaning to create this channel for a while, and circumstances just kept coming and stopping me from creating this channel. However, today I felt the call to create the channel, be it as rustically as you see it right now. Of course, you will not be seeing the channel going forward in such a rustic form. It will be in a much more polished manner that you will get familiar with this channel. But hey, this is the beginning and we all have to start somewhere. So let's read what our inner scape is, what our inner worries, what our inner understandings, what our inner questions may be for some of you. And of course, for those of you who this does not align with fully, I will encourage you to take a pause and maybe revisit the channel when you feel that there are some questions that remain unanswered within your thoughts, within your mind. Okay, so here's the tarot deck we will be using today. And what I want to highlight here is sometimes we are so stuck and we just want the solution to come and smack us in the face and say, here I am, grab me with both hands and don't let go. But it's also not about rushing the next step, but being radically honest and understanding where you are right now. Since today's reading seems to be rooted in the idea of growth mindset, the belief that we're not fixed in who we are, and that change, while uncomfortable, is the path to expansion. Growth mindset and fixed mindsets were terms coined by Carol Dweck. And as I shuffle, I invite you to think about an area in your life where you're ready to grow. Not because you're under some form of pressure. Yes, of course, we are under lots of pressure right now with the way the economy is, with the way the job market is. There is clearly a lot of pressure all around us in the world. But also through this pressure, we, as a humanity collective, are evolving through each individual who is experiencing that pressure. Right. That's our first card dropping out there. 9 of Swords. Interesting. So we are focused on our mind at this moment. An interesting card to have come out. Considering we are focused on mindset in this reading, it's an apt card. We will talk about it in a little bit of detail shortly. But let's pull out a couple of more cards to go with it, right? Oh, beautiful. We've got 6 of Pentacles showing up next. So a lot of power within individuals at this time seems to be coming up. These are minor arcana cards. For those of you who may not be familiar with tarot, minor arcana cards means we, on an individual level, have a lot that contributes towards it. And then we have the Knight of Pentacles. What does this reading mean? Let's take a moment to pause and think about it as I clear up this area. And this card seems to have jumped out, the Tower card. So maybe it wants to be a part of today's reading. So the Tower card, but reversed. So, okay. So we have begun with the 9 of Swords. As I mentioned, the 9 of Swords is all about the mind. This is the mind when it's the loudest, actually. When thoughts spiral at night, when fears feel real, even if they aren't rooted in the now, in reality. This card represents the stories we tell ourselves when no one else is listening. And often those stories are shaped by old beliefs, some unprocessed emotions, or internalized failure narratives. In psychology, we call these cognitive distortions. Thought patterns like categorizing black and white type of thinking, or reasoning through emotion. And here's the key. Your fears are real because you feel them. But that doesn't mean that they're true. What this card invites is not dismissal, but it invites you to be an observer. Can you pause and ask yourself when you catch a thought that we label as negative or unkind? We're the most unkind to ourselves often. In the quiet recesses of our mind, it's worth asking yourself, is this thought helpful? Am I being kind to myself? Is the thought even mine, or is it because somebody else installed this thought in my head? In reality, the growth mindset that we have been talking about, in terms of you being flexible when you can and want to be, it begins with action? No, it begins with awareness. Your own awareness of what's going on in your head. Next, we pulled the Six of Pentacles. As you can see, the Six of Pentacles. This card is an interesting pull because it's inviting us into considering that the next phase of our life could be about balance in energy, resources, the kind of emotions that we exchange, even if there are exchanges just within our own mind. You may be somebody who gives a lot, your time, your energy, your care. And while that can be beautiful, you also need to ask yourself, are you giving so much because it's coming from a place of generosity? Or is it coming from a place of fear? Not comfortable questions. And these uncomfortable questions are the easiest to ask in the privacy of your own mind. In psychological terms, this touches on patterns that are based on codependency or could also move into boundary theory. When our self-worth becomes tied to being needed, to being the giver. But in healthy relationships with others, with work, even with ourselves, these are based on reciprocity. So I ask you, are you giving where you're nourished? Are you receiving where you feel safe to be seen? If not, this card is asking you to recalibrate and rethink what your priorities may be. The next card we pulled for our collective reading was the Knight of Pentacles. The Knight of Pentacles appears to be very relaxed. If you see his body language, both the knight in the card's depiction of him and the horse seem to be steady, focused, and if they're moving at all, they're moving slowly. There's a good chance that you're here today on this channel seeking answers because you've been questioning your pace or progress lately. This card is a reassurance for those of you in that position to confirm that you may be slow, but that doesn't mean that you are stuck. So from a psychological lens, this reflects delayed gratification and grit. The quiet qualities that often predict long-term transformation more than being naturally talented or speed ever could. People who showcase grit often are much more resilient to any challenges, any failures, and overcome them. At the end, finding the success that they hope to have. Because change happens not in one big leap, but through repetition, consistency, and commitment. You don't need to explode onto the scene. You just need to keep showing up for yourself. Especially when no one is clapping yet. And finally, this card decided to jump out at us. The Tower, reversed though. Upright, this card stands for something that signifies sudden change, crisis, that breaks through any illusions. But reversed, in a tarot reading, it often is us holding on to some sort of an illusion, avoiding the collapse of the tower. And that makes sense. As humans, we are wired for safety. We don't want to rock the boat, so to speak. In psychology, we call this homeostasis. The pull to keep things the same, even when we know they aren't working anymore or they aren't giving us the joy that we seek out of life. We don't seek to be workhorses, working night and day. But real growth, the kind that lasts, requires disruption. That doesn't mean chaos. Disruption is when you apply it in a way where you have chosen to disrupt. It means surrendering what no longer fits, an outdated identity, a belief, a coping mechanism. This card asks, those of you who may be feeling its pull, what are you afraid will fall apart if you stop holding it up? But what's more important is going back to our growth mindset. If you are holding yourself back and living in the past and not leaving the past where it belongs, which is in the past, what are you holding back from rising up in its place? What could replace this tower that you seem to be hell-bent on hanging on to, even when it has served its purpose so far? So what we're going to do is to close off this reading. I'm going to go back to the two cards that we started off with, two card decks that we started off with, and see what comes of it. What do we pull that will give us some sort of clarity in terms of what this reading means? What are we aiming to gain out of it? And answer some additional questions that may not have yet been answered for you through these few minutes that we have spent together. So let me just do one final shuffle and we'll pull this card. So this card invites you very aptly to set an example for others by following my own path. Couldn't have been more clear for those of you who may still be unsure in terms of, is it time for you to stop holding up the tower, holding yourself back, asking yourself these questions that may or may not be easy to answer in clear terms? And let's end with a final message from the universe and see what the universe wants us to take away from this reading as something that would resonate with you, your family, your friends, the collective, those of us seeking answers that we're not able to come up upon. So let's see, what's the message from the universe? It says, bigger and better experiences are coming your way. You may not be able to see it, but great things are coming together for you as you read this. Trust the process and let it unfold in divine timing. Move forward knowing that all is working out just fine. So you are being invited to move forward, to not be worried about the slow pace that you may be moving forward in, to not hold up things that it may be time to let go of, to make sure that you are able to silence the mind when it's asking questions that are not helpful or making statements that are taking away your power and taking back your own power. And of course, it's about being true to yourself, not necessarily giving so much away of yourself just out of fear and out of the need to be needed, of being a giver. So that's pretty much the reading for today. What I do want to leave you with is ask you to not only notice what's wrong, it's about creating the space for what's right for you. Remember, your thoughts are powerful, but they're not permanent. Your relationships deserve reciprocity, not depletion. Your progress is valid, even when quiet. And your evolution will require a form of release. But that doesn't mean that you're abandoning who you truly are. As I end, I invite you to write one sentence today that affirms your growth. Not as a goal, but as your natural state, as who you really and truly are. In inviting you to write this statement, I'm thinking of what a similar statement would be for me, because this reading clearly is also something that was important for me to do, resonates with me. And that for me means that by showing up today in this messy format, I've honored my readiness for this moment and not perfection. So by showing up today, I've honored my readiness, not perfection. I hope you've enjoyed this first reading from Radiant Energy. I will be having more readings like this. Please do let me know in the comments whether you would prefer it to be more based on elaborating the psychological concepts I have touched upon today, or going more deep spiritually. I look forward to hearing back from you. Have a blessed rest of your day, or rest of your evening, night, whatever time zone you're in. Stay blessed.